Today's daf yomi. Today's daf yomi is Sotah daf chaf, a very important daf, very special daf. So the Mishnah tells us on 20a, Ad lo nimcha ka Megillah. So they wrote the passage of the Sotah. The Sofer wrote it, but prior to it being erased, Amra, she says, Eini Shota. She says, I don't want to drink. She confesses. So then Megillah Saming Nezes. So then at that point, the Megillah is the scroll of that the Sotah passage is written on it, is buried. It's buried next to the temple. Uminchasa mispazeres al deshen, and a grain offering is not brought either. So it's scattered over the floor of the courtyard. There was a place where they used to burn the kachim, the holy sacrifices, which became disqualified. And so that's where this mincha was burnt. Ve'ein Megillah sa kshera lahashkot ba. And this scroll is not going to be permitted to give a Sotah acharis, to give another Sotah woman to drink from. So you can only use it for this Sotah woman, but once she confesses, you cannot use the scroll anymore, so it has to be buried. But Nimchaka Megillah, let's say the scroll was erased, but Amran, she says, Tameani, she says, listen, I actually did commit the sin, and Amayim Nishpachim, then the water is poured out, Uminchasan Mispazeres al Beis Hadeshin, and her mincha is also burnt. But Nimchaka Megillah, let's say the scroll was erased, but Amra Eini Shota, she doesn't confess the sin, she just says, I don't want to drink it. Then Ma'arin Osa Mashkin Sabal Karcha, then we intimidate her and we force her to drink against her will. Says the Gemara, Eina Maspekes Lishtos Ad Shepanea Morikos. The Gemara says, even before she finishes drinking the bitter waters, her face turns different colors. It turns pale, it turns green. They now boltos, and her eyes pop out. Vehimis malais gidin, and she becomes filled with her tendons. Vehim omrim, and then the people who are there, the Pirchei Kahuna or the crowd, they say, Hotziuat, quickly take her out. Shaloti Tamei Azara, we don't want her to die in the courtyard, and it'll make the courtyard Tamei. Im yesh slus, and the Gemara is going to discuss in tomorrow's daf, what could this slus be? And if she has some merits, then the punishment does not come immediately, it's suspended. Yesh slus, there are some merits that are tola shana achas that suspend the punishment for 1 year. Yesh slus tola beis shanim, and yesh slus tola gimel shanim. There are some merits that suspend it for 1 year, some for 2 years, some for 3 years. Mikan Amar Ben Azai Chayev Adam Ulamed Espiso Torah. That Ben Azai says from here, you see that a person is obligated to teach his daughter Torah. Shem Tishta, because if she should drink, Teda Shas Torah, she'll have to know that the reason why she's not dying right away, even though she sinned, is because she has these merits to defend her, and so therefore she won't throw out the Torah. This is just an astonishing statement by Ben Azai. You have to teach your daughter Torah so that when she sins, she does, and she's obviously violated Torah, she won't think that the Torah's punishments are not true, because she'll realize that the reason why she's not being punished is only because she has some merits that are protecting her. What's the merit? Gemara is going to discuss what the merit is, but maybe we could say that the merit is her Torah study. If you read it literally, a person is obligated to teach his daughter Torah so that if she drinks, she'll know that the merits will protect her. What merit? Maybe it's the merit of the Torah study. It's not what the Gemara's conclusion is. It's not her own Torah study. And if you read the literal text of the Mishnah, that's what it seems to be saying. It's a very difficult idea. Rabbi Eliezer says, "V'kol ha'melamed bito Torah umedes tiflus." Rabbi Eliezer says, whoever teaches his daughter Torah, it's teaching her Tiflis. Tiflis, the Gemara is going to discuss what it means, but it's a derogatory statement. Rabbi Yeshua, and the reason is because she'll know how to get out of the punishment for adultery just by having merits. Rabbi Yeshua says, Rotza isha v'kava tiflos mitei shekabenu precious. Rabbi Yeshua says, a woman wants one kav, which is a measure, and tiflos, which is this derogatory idea, more than 9 kabin and precious. And the Gemara is going to, precious is refraining from intercourse. Gemara is going to discuss what that means. Rabbi Yeshua used to teach us, Chassid Sotah, a pious man who's actually a fool, the Rasha Aram, and a wicked man who's crafty and cunning, the Isha Prusha, and a woman who carries herself as though she's a Prusha, as though she's very careful in sexual matters, and she's really not. Umakos Prushin is a person who flagellates himself as a result, as a way of pretending that he's very pious. These are people who are destroying the world with their false pretenses. Rabbi Yehuda Rashmon B'Shem Rabbi Meir, the Gemara says that Rabbi Meir taught, I was pouring this kankantum. This kankantum is this material that makes the ink indelible. I was pouring it into the ink. He didn't say anything to me. When I came to Rabbi Shmuel, he said to me, B'ni, ma malachtacha, what's your job? I'm a scribe. Be very careful, because your work is the work of heaven. Maybe you're going to diminish one letter or add on a letter. And if you do that, you're destroying the whole world. Rashi says it's like if you take the aleph from the word Hashem Elokechem Emes, you're not saying Emes, God is truth, but you're saying Mace, which is death. So one letter can make the whole difference. And he said to Rabbi Shmuel, I have one thing that I stick into the ink, and its name is kankantum. Its name is indelible. So Rabbi Shmuel said to me, you really put this indelible matter into the ink? Torah says you have to erase the passage of the Sotah. It has to be a writing that you're able to erase. Mar says, what's this back and forth between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Shmuel? I just want to pause for a second. Now, Rabbi Meir, why this specifically is this story taking place with Rabbi Meir? We know from other sources Rabbi Meir was a student of Elisha ben Avuah, who was a heretic, and they were very concerned that Rabbi Meir, he thinks he's able to withstand the dangers of the heresy being taught by Elisha ben Avuah. And so they said to him, you have to be very careful. Don't add on a letter or don't detract a letter, because you could be changing the whole text, especially since your other teacher was a heretic. So the Gemara says, explain this conversation. My come our way and my come another way. So he says, he said to him, not only by letters which are chaseros and yaseros, so some words have less letters, some words have more letters, but, and I'm an expert in that, meaning to say some words are spelled with the yud, some without the yud, some with the vav, some without the vav. But even, I'm not even concerned about a fly. I know that there's a possibility that a fly can scratch off the crown of the dalet and turn it into a reish, but I'm not worried about that, because because I have something that I stick into the ink. What is it? Kankantum shmo. I have kankantum, and kankantum makes the letter indelible, so I don't have to be worried that the letter is going to be erased. Gemara says, Vatanya, is this really the case? Eini, is it really the case? Vatanya, I'm Rabbi Meir. Is it really the case? Rabbi Meir was studying with Rabbi Akiva, and then he goes to Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Shmuel tells him, be careful. Vatanya, I'm Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Shmuel, that they have the story reversed in this brisa. Rabbi Meir says, when I was studying Torah with Rabbi Shmuel, I used to put the ink into the indelible matter into the ink, and he didn't tell me anything. When I came to Rabbi Akiva, he prohibited upon me. Kashya Shimush Hashimush. It's a contradiction. In the first source, we say that Rabbi Akiva was the one who Rabbi Meir studied with first. And here we said that he studied with Rabbi Yishmael first. So, Kashya, Asra. In the first case, Rabbi Meir allowed it. In the first case, Rabbi Akiva allowed it, and Rabbi Yishmael objected. In this case, Rabbi Akiva objected, and Rabbi Yishmael allowed it. So the Gemara says, Bishlam Hashimush Hashimush Lo Kasha. The Shimush Hashimush, who did he study with first, is not difficult. Meikara, initially, Asal Kame de Rabbi Akiva. Initially, he studied before Rabbi Akiva. Kivin lo Matzi Kam, but since Kivin lo Matzi Kam Aliba, Asal Kame de Rabbi Yishmael. But he wasn't able to really understand his Rabbi Akiva. Rashi says, Alikari Tameh. He couldn't understand what Rabbi Akiva was talking about. It's because Rabbi Akiva was saying about something that was Tameh, that was Tar. And he was showing him that something that was Tar was Tameh. And he didn't understand it. He was Maral upon him. He didn't understand what this phrase meant. It was too difficult for him. He couldn't, Rabbi Akiva was too advanced. And Rabbi Meir couldn't understand it. So therefore, also coming to Rabbi Yishmael, he came in front of Rabbi Yishmael, the Gamra, and he just learned it straight. He just learned it straight without any kuntzes, without any complicated shitos. He just learned it straight, the straight Gemara. And then Hadar also coming to Rabbi Akiva, is Savar Svara. So, and then he came back in front of Rabbi Akiva to understand the reasoning and the deep concepts. Before you get to all the reasoning and the deep analysis, you have to have the Gemara. You have to just learn the basic laws. You have to do the Daf Yomi before you could get to all the different complicated conceptual analysis. Just learn the straight Gemara. It's a very big mistake that our day school systems do. They're teaching like sugyas in depth before you really know the basic sugya. Just everybody has to just know the basic daf yomi, and then we could start doing all the deep analysis. So the Gemara says, fine, we understand shimush hashimush. So that first he starts with Rabbi Akiva, he goes back, and then he goes to Rabbi Yishmael, and then he goes back to Rabbi Akiva. Ela asra kasha. So, but in the first case, Rabbi Akiva allows you putting the kankantum in. In the second case, he doesn't, and it's reversed for Rabbi Yishmael. So the Gemara says, indeed, that's kasha. It's a difficulty. Tanya, as the Gemara says, let's analyze this more. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Rabbi Meir l'chol matilin kankantum utoch hadil. Now Rabbi Yehuda said that Rabbi Meir said you could stick the kankantum, this indelible material to make the ink indelible. You stick it into the ink for everybody, for every passage of the Torah. Chutz mi parsha Sotah bilvad, with the exception of the Sotah passage, even when it's in the Torah scroll, that's not allowed to be erased because that's not allowed to be indelible. That has to be capable of being erased. That's what Rabbi Yehuda says. Rabbi Yaakov said in the name of Rabbi Meir, Chutz min parsha Sotah shel mikdash, with the exception of the Sotah passage of the temple, meaning to say when the Sotah passage is written in the temple, it can't have kankantum. It can't be indelible. But when it's written in the Torah, it can have the kankantum in it. So the Gemara says, "My benai, what's the difference between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yaakov? The difference between them, distinction is whether you could put the kankantum into the Sotah passage that's written in the Torah. That Rabbi Yehuda says you cannot. Rabbi Yaakov says you can. Rabbi Yaakov says the prohibition to erase it is only in the Sotah passage that's written for the temple to be erased when it's given to the woman to drink. Gemara says, Vahani Tanai, and this dispute between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yaakov is Kihani Tanai. It's like a similar dispute. Titania, A Megilta, it's really a question because the Gemara says it. We should connect the two disputes. Titania, A Megilasa, Kshera, Ashkospa, Sotah Charas. It says in the Brisa, you're not allowed to use one Sotah passage that was written to give it to a second Sotah to drink. It has to be only with the one you wrote it for. V'achai bar Yoshaya Omar Megilasa Kshero Hashkas Sotah Charas. And Rabbi Chai Bar Yoshaya says, no, you can use the Megillah to give it to another woman to drink, and it doesn't need to be written lishma. And so therefore, since it doesn't need to be written lishma, we could say, therefore, you could use the passage that was written in the Torah. And so therefore, the one that's written in the Torah, you have to say, has to be written in a manner that which could be erased. And so therefore, it would be consistent with Rabbi Yehuda, who says that the passage in the Torah has to be able to be erased. So Amar Papa Domalohi, maybe the two arguments are not the same. Ad Kama Kamar Tanakama Hasam. What's the reason why the Tanakama says over there that a Megillah, a scroll that's written for one woman, is disqualified for another woman? It's only because given the because it's written for one person, for Rachel, you can then take it and uproot it and write it for Leah. Torah the stomach, but the Torah passage, which wasn't written for a specific woman, the stomach sieve, it's just written stam, Hashem Duchas, say for Torah, we technically speaking should be able to erase that because it wasn't written for a specific person yet. And Amram Nachman Bar Yitzchak, Ram Nachman Bar Yitzchak says, no, maybe that's not the case. Ad Gan will come Rabbi Achai Bar Yoshaya Hasam. What's the reason why Rabbi Achai Bar Yoshaya says, in the case of the Sotah passage that's written for one woman, you can then use it for a different woman. He says that only by Megillah, the Ichtav L'Shem Alos Ba'olam, because it was written for specifically to be erased for a curse of Torah, the Islamic Siva, but a Torah is written to be studied, to be read from, to be studied as Torah. Maybe he would agree with the position of that it's not able to be erased, and so therefore you would be able to write it in indelible ink. With Rabbi Yaakov's position in the name of Rabbi Meir. So the Gemara says, well, let's just ask a question. Rabbi Chai Bar Yoshaya, who says that once it's written for one woman, you can still use it for another woman. What about the fact that doesn't he hold, like we say by Gerish and by divorce? Isn't he of the position? Let's say a person writes a divorce, to divorce his wife, and then he changes his mind, and Matzu ben Iro, and then another person from his town finds the same get, and he has the same exact name as him and as his wife, and so he wants to use it to divorce his wife. Says, I have the same name as you, and my wife has the same name as you. Maybe I'll just use your get. Apostle Garishbo, it says you're not allowed to use that get. It's because the get was written lishma. It has to be written for the specific woman, even if the other woman has the same name. So how can Rabbi Chai Bar Yoshaya say by a Sotah you could use the one that was written for one woman and use it for a different woman? So the Gemara says, well, Amr Yahasam because of what? Amr Rahmana, but Ksiv Lishma. There it says specifically in the Torah by a get, you write it for her. And so therefore, specifically it has to be written for her. But here too it says it has to be done for her. It says it specifically in the verse that it says Mar explains, no, V'asala doesn't mean writing. It means erasing needs to be done for that specific person. So therefore, it's not necessarily the case that if you write it for one person, you can't use it for a different one. That's what Rabbi Chai Bar Yoshaya says. Rabbi Chai Bar Yoshaya says that. So the Gemara says that the Mishnah had said that she doesn't finish drinking before her face changes colors and her eyes explode. So, and money, who is this author of our Mishnah? It's Rabbi Shimon. This must be the position of Rabbi Shimon. Because what does Rabbi Shimon say? He says, that first you give her the grain offering, and then you give her the bitter waters to drink. So therefore, she's drinking the bitter waters. There's nothing more that needs to be done. Therefore, the bitter waters can start taking their effect. Because we know that until the mincha was brought, the waters don't check her. They're not efficacious. And the reason why we know this is Dilchsiv. It says a verse, Minchas zikaron maskeras avon. It says in the verse, it's a mincha of remembrance that reminds us of her sin. And so therefore, since the waters are taking effect immediately, it means clearly that it's being brought after It's being drunk after the grain offering was brought, and this is consistent with the position of Rabbi Shimon. But we have a problem. How can we say it's consistent with the position of Rabbi Shimon? Ema Seifa, the concluding clause of the Mishnah says, Yesh Laslas, Isa Tola. And if she has a merit, then the waters don't affect her right away. It suspends the effect of the waters. Also, Rabbanan, that must not be like Rabbi Shimon. That must be like the position of the Rabbanan. The Rabbi Shimon, Ha'amar ain't supposed to open my mamar. Rabbi Shimon says in the next Mishnah on Chav Beis that the waters ain't supposed to open my mamar, that the waters do not protect her. The bitter waters don't suspend her punishment, even though she has a merit. Even though she has a merit, the bitter waters punishment is not suspended. So the Gemara says, well, we're going to say it's a third of Tana. It's not Rabban, it's not Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Akiva. This is the position of Rabbi Akiva, who says, he says, first you bring the grain offering, and only then you give her a drink. That's like Rabbi Shimon. When it comes to the merit, he holds like the Rabbanon, that indeed the merits do suspend the punishment. The people who are there, the Pirchei Kahuna and the crowd, they say, take her out before she makes the courtyard tameh. My time, what's the concern? The Dilma Mesa, because we're concerned she's going to die. And to get her out of the courtyard of the temple. But why? What's the problem with she dying in terms of making it tameh? You think that she's not standing in the temple itself. That's called the Machane Shechina. She's standing in the area around the temple. Today we call this the Temple Mount, which is equivalent to the Machane Leviah, the Levitical camp. And a dead body is allowed to be there, and somebody who's Tamei Mace is allowed to be there. And that's why today you can go on the Temple Mount as long as you've gone into the mikvah. You've removed the tumah hayotze minakos, the tumah that comes out of your body, i.e. the zav or the zera. But you're allowed to be there even though you're tummy from a dead body. And how do we know that? We just had this in Nazir. Tamei Mace mutar lekanes machane leviah. Somebody who's tummy from a dead body can enter into the machane leviah, to the Levite camp. Not only the Tamei Mace itself, even a dead body itself. And how do we know this? Moshe took Joseph's bones with him. Where Moshe was sleeping, that's where the bones of Joseph were. So we see that Moshe was in the Levitical camp, the Levites' camp, and he had the bones of Joseph with him. So why did they have to hustle her out? The Abai says we're concerned that maybe she would become a nida, that we're concerned that maybe she would, since she became afraid, she would start to have the menstrual drops, and therefore she would be tamei, and she can't be tamei if she's in that part of the temple. Well, Meimer, this means to tell us that when she's afraid, it breaks down the defenses that stop the blood from flowing out of her body. This is true. Esther heard the news about Mordecai that he was going to, that he was protesting in the courtyard of the king, and she became very afraid. That means she became a nida. But we have a different source that says when a woman is too afraid, then the period stops. So the menstruation stops. So the Gemara says, that if she has the ongoing fear, then it will stop. But if she has sudden anxiety, then it will heal it, then it will loosen it, and the blood will come out. If she has a merit, it could suspend her punishment for a year or 2 years or 3 years, says our Mishnah. So the Gemara says, Mani mas nisan, our Mishnah is not like Lo Abba Yossi ben Hanan, or Rabbi Elazar ben Yitzchak, Ish Kfar Daram, or Rabbi Shmuel. It's not like any of these positions. The Tanya, we learned in the Brisa, because the position of Divrei Abba Yossi ben Hanan. Abba Yossi ben Hanan says that if she has a merit, then it suspends it for 3 months. And our Mishnah says it suspends it for 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years. And where does he get 3 months from? Kedei Hakarasa Uber. That's the amount of time it takes to recognize the fetus. So that's how we're going to say that her merit is only going to protect her for 3 months. Elazar ben Yitzchak Ish Kfar Daram says Teisha Chadashim, and it'll suspend the punishment for 9 months, because it says V'nikta V'nizra'a. Zara, it says that she will become innocent if she was not guilty, and she will give birth to a child. And later on in Psalms, it states Zera Ya'av Denu Yisupar, which means whoever believes in Hashem and they serve him forever, those people God will allow them to live, and they will talk about his deeds to the next generation. And we see from here Zera Roy Lasaper, that you have descendants who are worthy to tell of God's deeds. And that's 9 months. So the word Zera is a reference to 9 months. And Rabbi Shmuel says, no, how long will it suspend her? That it will protect her for up to 12 months. 12 months. Even though there's no specific proof, there is a zeichor davar. There's a hint to the matter. Because it says in the book of Daniel that it says in the book of Daniel, when Daniel was interpreting the dream of Nebuchadnezzar, and he was telling Nebuchadnezzar that he was going to be exiled and he was going to live amongst the animals, Daniel gave him an idea of advice how he could save his life. He said, Lohen Malka, Malki Yishafer, Malki Yishpar Alecha, Lechata'acha, Bitzdaka Peruk, Vaviascha B'michan Aniyan. So he says, Daniel says to him, okay, listen, I know you're the king, but listen to my counsel. I'm going to give you good advice. And so you're going to be able to believe what I'm saying, and I'm going to protect you. And he says, give charity. And he says, if you're going to give charity and you help the poor people, then you're not going to be punished. And indeed, Nebuchadnezzar did this. He gathered all the poor people of Israel and he gave them money. Uksiv, kola, mital, Nebuchadnezzar, malka. And uksiv, uktsas, yarchin, treyasar. And it says that all the solution that he gave to Nebuchadnezzar, the solution of the dream, it all happened. And then it says at the end of 12 months it happened, which means to say he was able to suspend his punishment for 12 months by giving the charity. So we see from here, even according to Rabbi Shmuel, all it does is to suspend the punishment for 12 months, but not for 3 years like our Mishnah says. So the Gemara is going to have to address this in tomorrow's daf. I want to stop here, but I wanted to just say that